Hey, welcome to Riverside. Today we will be doing an interview with Larry Sawyer, and Larry Sawyer is a really good guy. He's very much a people person, and he's been a minister for a very long time. I have no idea exactly how long. Very long time though. And the reason I wanted to interview him is this: he's not a fisherman. He's not in the fishing world or anything like this. So you might be asking, why are you interviewing this random minister? Here's why. Larry Sawyer was a minister in my church growing up, the Oklahoma Church of Christ here in Louisville, and that's where I'm a minister at now. And as a minister, you always want to make sure that you keep your congregation your focus. In other words, you never want to leave them in the dust and all of a sudden go off somewhere and try to do something and put all your focus in places that it doesn't belong. And so what I'm going to do is interview church members and really try to find a way that Riverside can serve my church. And my prayer is that while it serves the church, it also serves you, anybody else who is watching, and serves you in a way that you can learn from people's stories, hear from people's lives, and hopefully take what they've learned in their life and then apply it to yours. I'll be interviewing people from my church for a little while. I don't know. I'll have some other interviews with fishermen and things like that too. But this is something that I've really wanted to do for a long time. This is something that a bit of a passion project, to be completely honest. So I'm excited. Here is an interview with Larry Sawyer. Well, so we'll just go ahead and get started. We're already recording. It's already being taped
Sure.
at this point.
That's fine.
I guess I'll explain to you why I'm doing this, because this is a fishing channel, or at least it's marketed as a fishing channel. But okay, so the reason that I've did this is you'll probably understand this as a minister. Is it's easy to sometimes get distracted from what your calling is as a minister, meaning like. Ministering to your own people. Sometimes it's easy to get distracted by things that are out there in the world or whatever it is and leave your flock behind. And that's something to have to be wary of about with Riverside, is to keep the focus what it needs to be. The people here at our church who I work with every week and all that stuff. And so the question then is, if I have something like Riverside, how could Riverside serve my church? How could Riverside serve Oklahoma? And so started thinking about it and pondering. And my thought was this: there's a lot of people here. I've been here for 30 years. There's a lot of people here who I don't know that well. And there's a lot of people here who I know on a very surface level. I have a very surface level knowledge of them. And so how can I get a deeper knowledge of the people around me? How can I get to know these people better? And get to know these people below just the surface level of their name and how they're related to this person and that person. And so that's the goal with this. I'm going to do a lot of these videos with people from Oklahoma just to get to know them a little bit better. And I figured if I'm having that issue, if I don't know a lot of people and I'm a minister here, surely there's a lot of other people at our church who feel the same way, who are a part of Oklahoma but don't really don't really know the church members that well. So that's the goal of this. I figured you'd be a great one to start with because most people are at least familiar with you. And so the goal of this is really to just find out who you are and just learn about you.
Okay.
So I guess let's start with the basics. Where were you? Where are you from? Where are you born?
I was born in Oak Hickory, Tennessee, which is a suburb of Nashville. I was born in 1953, November the 15th. I was the second of three children to Ed and Marie Sawyer. I have an older sister named Donna and a younger brother named Jerry. My sister was born in 50. Jerry was born in 57. And so I grew up there in the outskirts of Nashville, went to school there. That's where I hail from.
All right. So you said your mom was Marie?
Yeah, we call her Murr. One of the grandkids started calling her Murr.
Murr,
And so
I like that.
most everybody now knows her as that, but her name is Marie. My dad died in 2004. He was Ed Sawyer. He worked for EI DuPont there in Oak Hickory.
Okay.
Oak Hickory was a put together, fabricated village for the workers at DuPont.
Okay.
And so he worked there. Mother, she worked at the telephone company for a little while. And then most of the time we were growing up, she was stay at home mom till we got grown and gone. She started doing some other things.
Okay. Cool. And then so you grew up in Nashville. You had 3 siblings. You were one of 4, right? You said.
No, I'm one of 3. I'm the middle child.
You're the middle child. That's the good one, right?
Yeah, no, it's not. No, it's not.
So what were your siblings? What are they like?
My sister Donna, she's 3 years older than me, and she lives there in the outskirts of Nashville in a place called Hermitage, Tennessee.
Okay.
She has been a school teacher for a number of years, and she had some disabilities that came up. She wound up stepping out of the role as a teacher. She taught at Ezel Harding Christian School in Nashville. My brother, he is 4 years younger than me. His name is Jerry. And he started out doing various jobs. He had a T-shirt shop for a while, and he was doing some other stuff. And then he decided he wanted to be a youth minister, so he wound up going to Dyersburg, Tennessee, to be a youth minister. Wanted to preach. Stayed a youth minister for several years. Wanted to preach, and they hired him there at West Dyersburg for a couple of years, and he decided that he would go do mission work in the central part of Virginia. And he's back in Nashville now preaching for the Central Pike Church of Christ. So he's in full-time ministry right now.
Oh, I didn't know that. Now he's involved with Torch Ministries, right? The Honduras and all that stuff to some degree.
He got involved with that because
his daughter, right?
Our kids got us involved in Torch, okay. Hannah specifically. When Andy wanted to go, we said, we're not sending you without one of us going with you to make sure that you don't just go down there and goof off.
That's fair.
So I said, well, I'll go. And Jennifer said, well, I'm not staying here and y'all all go. We're all going. So sense. we started taking other people with us, people from Okolona and other people. And some of Jerry's children, he's got 4 kids, some of them went with us. And so as a result of his kids coming and going with us, he and his wife, Kathy Joe, they started going on the Honduras mission trips as well. Okay.
So what was it like growing up with them? Did y'all always get along pretty well, or y'all fight a lot? Or
I jokingly say that we put the fun in dysfunctional. That we were a normal group of people. We fought. My sister would aggravate the fire to me sometimes, and I'm sure that I would aggravate her. My brother and I got along pretty good because we did a lot of things together. And the older we got, the closer we got. I flunked out of college, and when I went back in 1975 to Tennessee Tech, he went with me, and we roomed together.
Really? I think you've told me that before.
Yeah, when I went to Harding to do some Bible study, he transferred to Harding as well. So for 2 years, we had an apartment, lived together out there, and then I moved to Troy, Alabama, and he moved there probably 2 or 3 years after I moved there. He and his wife, she worked at a bank, and he ran a T-shirt shop. And so my brother and I, we've been really close because we've done a lot of things together.
Okay. That's very cool. Now, you said you went to Harding. Did you go there your entire education, or?
No, I went to Tennessee Tech and got a degree in business.
I didn't know that. Okay.
I was not going to go to Lipscomb because my sister had gone to Lipscomb and she was a brainiac. She knew a lot. And I like to play more than I like to study. And so going all the way through school, they would say, "Are you Donna's brother?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And they'd say, "Are you sure you're Donna's brother?" And I'd say, "Well, best I remember, that's true." And I just decided I am not going to go to Lipscomb and follow in her shadow again. So I was in high school band. I'd been to a drum clinic at Tennessee Tech in Cookeville, Tennessee, about an hour out of Nashville. And I got heavily involved in the Christian Student Center, was working on a degree in accounting. And that's when I got to play in church softball and doing more with the Christian Student Center than I did studying. So when I went back, I changed my major to business management with a minor in accounting and history. And so when I went to Harding, what I found out was if I wanted to get a master's in Bible, I'd have to have quite a bit of undergraduate Bible, which would take me another year, maybe year and a half. And I just figured I don't need to do that. I need to get this done and get on with ministry. So found a 2-year program. The Christian Communication program at Harding was kind of a separate entity from the rest of the school. It was pretty much a preacher training program. 2 years of intensive study. Went through the whole Bible in 2 years. Did some mission work in the States and foreign missions, and wound up graduating from that program and moved to Troy, Alabama.
Okay. Now, what was I guess your parents went to church. Did they take you to church as a kid? And like, how did your faith start?
My mother's mom and dad were very religious people, members of the Church of Christ. My dad's parents were not. Both of them, if I remember correctly, both of them were baptized at later ages. I remember my grandfather, my daddy's daddy, was baptized when he was about 72 or 3. But because of my mama's faith, my daddy wound up becoming a Christian about a year and a half before I was born. And he took it pretty serious.
Okay.
So we were people who went on a regular basis. We were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, vacation Bible school, camp, whatever was going on. We were a part of that. It wasn't like we were made to do it. It was like, we enjoyed that.
It's just what you did, and it's part of your life.
Yeah, it was. There was a lot of kids that we were going to school with. Most everybody that went to school went to church someplace there in Old Hickory, and so we had a large group of kids that were my age, my sister's age. They had a lot of kids, and so it wasn't fashionable as much as it was. You were with people that you knew and spent a lot of time with anyway, and so it was good.
Okay, so then tell me, I want to know more about your mom and like specifically how she helped develop your faith as a young, like as a kid and as a teenager and all that stuff.
She when they moved to Old Hickory, my dad did a lot of he did what he could to discourage her from going to worship and being a part of the church, because it just wasn't his cup of tea. And so my mom was, in the early years, she was the torch bearer. She was the one that was passing along faith.
Okay.
And so she spent quite a bit of time watching us, teaching us, trying to keep us away from stuff that we didn't have any business being a part of. Our house was always open to young people.
I love that.
Our yard, a lot of spots didn't have any grass because that's where home base and first base, second base, third base was. And so, our house was kind of like the hangout. And I realized years later that one of the reasons the mother did that was because she really enjoyed being around young people and encouraging them. But I also realized that she, that was one of her ways of keeping an eyeball on us. She knew who we were running with, what we were doing, how we were acting, okay. And so she was plugged in. And so I'd say that my mom was one of those people that was hands-on. She was one of those very very instrumental in making sure that we behaved and that we we did what we were supposed to do.
Well, that's so important too. Is as youth ministry, you see the trends and the stats show it and everything that the more the parents are involved in a child's life as far as their faith goes, the more likely that student is to maintain the faith once they get out of high school and into college and all that stuff. And you can see that in youth groups, like any youth group you go to. The generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, the ones who are most involved are the ones whose parents are involved too, and the ones who, and again, not always, but a lot of times it's the ones who really have a deep faith. The students, a lot of that points straight back to mom and dad.
She, she hosted a lot of parties, Halloween parties, and things like that, and she was always in to try to scare us. She was one that would load up the car with a bunch of kids and take them to after Sunday night worship, take us to like Shawnee's or I know we lived really close to the Hermitage, and
Okay.
supposedly there was this guy. They called him the Hook Man, and he had a hook, and if you went out there and parked in front of the Hermitage at the main gate, he would come out. And we
Okay.
had been out there and been out there and been out there and been out there and never seen anything. And one night my mom took us out there and pulled up at the gate and put on the lights bright, and out the front door this guy came with a hook. And I was freaking out. Some of the guys were hanging out hollering, come on, come on, Hook Man, we got your number, come on. And I'm going, no, we don't, let's go. So we left, and then we came back, and she was always one that was she was fun. The Christianity wasn't something that was very stiff and rigid and methodical and mechanical as much as it was. It was just an everyday way of life, and it was involved with joy.
Yeah, that's really cool. She seems like a solid lady.
Now, my dad he was the breadwinner. He worked at DuPont for a number of
Okay.
years. The cellophane plant closed,
Okay.
and he wound up buying in somehow. Now, I asked my mother about this the other day, and she didn't know all the details, but somehow or another he bought into a filling station, a gas station in the day when that little hose that was out stretched across, and you would drive across it, and it would ding ding, and guys would come out and actually clean your windshield, check your oil, and fill your car up with gas. And
It's like an ancient myth that I've heard. It's like
yeah,
I've heard
hey,
about that, but I've never seen it.
I worked there as a
Really?
12, 13-year-old. I pumped gas during the summer.
At
And
12 or 13?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd go hang out at the gas station, because he had a cast of characters that my daddy ran with. It was so much fun. But he did that for about 4 years and was doing really well. But he worked from dark in the morning till dark at night. It was just too much stress on him. And he had an episode where he thought he had a heart attack. And it wasn't a heart attack, but he realized that I'm not doing enough for God. And so my dad, with an 8th grade education, went to Nashville School of Preaching. And he studied the Bible for 2 solid years. And then he started preaching at little bitty country churches.
Really? That's
And
insane.
so we would go with them. He preached at 3 different little bitty country churches over probably 20 years. One of the ministries was over near Gallatin, Tennessee, a little place called Cottontown, and we did a bus route and brought all kinds of people in and baptized a lot of folks. Church was growing, and we were right in the thick of that. But it was like you'd leave early on Sunday morning, and you would be there late Sunday afternoon running the bus route. And then you would go home, and by the time you got home, you'd go back. Because Gallatin was probably about an hour drive from where we lived. Cottontown was. Gallatin was probably 30, 40 minutes away. So, church, to a lot of people, church is a sideline. It's something that, but to us, it had always been pretty much a way of life. It was, I mean, we weren't Bible bangers or anything like that, but we were. Um,
You took it seriously, it seems.
well, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so that's all really cool. Well, first of all, I can't believe it. At 12 years old, you're over here pumping gas. That's pretty funny. But secondly, let me ask you this.
Hey, listen, I'm old enough that I don't even think OSHA existed back then. Okay,
That's funny.
There's nobody coming along. I think my dad gave me like $1, and I was supposed to fill up the candy machine and the Coke machine, and most of the time I was sitting on a Coke box drinking a Coke with some peanuts that poured over in them. It was one of those things.
That's fun.
Yeah, it was a blast.
So let me ask you this. Generally, with most people, there comes a point when their faith goes from a faith that's given to them by their parents to a faith that they take seriously and they make it their own, and they start questioning things and building things for themselves. So, what was that point for you, or was there a point like that for you, or what was that like?
There was a guy years ago. I read his book. His last name was Westerhoff, and he wrote a book that was about faith, and he had 4 steps of faith, and one was an affiliated faith where you went to a church just because your parents did, your friends did. The first one, I don't remember what he called it, but it was pretty much you were drugged there. You were a little kid, and there was no discussion. They just put you on, dressed you up, took you there, which that's what we do with our little small kids. Mm-hmm. But the last one of those stages was an owned faith. And so when I went to a state school, there was nobody looking over my shoulder saying, okay, you need to go to church, you need to read your Bible, you need to be involved in some sort of ministry. And so my first year of college, there were a lot of those professors that were talking about evolution, and that's a fact, and religion's a joke, and so I had to go one direction or the other. I had to grow up in a hurry, so I had to do some deep digging to figure out, okay, why do I believe what I believe? And so that was part of the process. My second year at Tech, I got involved with the Christian Student Center, which was a campus ministry. It was right off the campus there at Tennessee Tech, and it was associated with the College Side Church of Christ. A lot of the professors went to church there, so I got involved in that, and that was another time that I really got I got serious about my faith, because I was running with some people that they were doing what they did, not because they were at a Christian school, it was expected of them. They were doing what they did because it was what they did. It was their life. And so I think your question, was there a moment? There's an extended period of time there where probably up to 1975, where, and especially August of 1975, that it got real and it got serious, and it was I believe what I believe because I believe it.
That's really cool. So when did you start going to? Let me ask you this. I guess then, when did you start deciding on ministry?
Well, my dad preached at a small country churches, and in those churches you find some of the what we would call the salt of the earth people. A lot of them farmers. Just really down to earth people. And so my junior year at Tech, I realized that there was some guys that were going out and preaching for a lot of these little country churches that couldn't afford to pay a preacher. And there were probably about 4 or 5 from the student center that went out. There was a guy by the name of Horace Burke that was responsible for kind of helping that happen. And so I just told them that, hey, I grew up in a church where they stood you up front. The Old Hickory Church was about 700, 800, 900 people, and so they'd stand you up there and let you lead singing and pray, and they'd let you talk and do a Wednesday night devotional. There'd be 400 or 500 people there, and your knees would be knocking, but they were passing. I mean, it's like you're scared to death, but you grew up, that wasn't necessarily a fear. And so I volunteered. So I wound up going and preaching for some of the smaller country churches. You'd go one place one Sunday, and then the next Sunday you'd go to a different church. And so you had one lesson for a month, and you'd use it to all the different places. But I wound up going to Salina, Tennessee, to a little church called the Beach Bethany Church of Christ.
Okay.
There were some of the most wonderful people there, and I spent 4 years there from 73 to 77. And somebody told me, I don't remember who it was, but somebody said, you really have a gift with people. You really have a gift with ministry, and you should pursue this. And there were two thoughts. One was that, you use it or lose it. And the second one was, if I'm going to do this, I really need to get as much Bible knowledge as I could. So it was during that time, probably 1975-6, that somebody said, because the church began to grow. We were baptizing quite a few people. There's a lot of kids coming. It was kind of a cool kind of thing to have, a packed house. I had no idea what I was doing. As far as sermons was concerned, I'd gone to the Gospel Advocate bookstore and got some preacher outline books, and would take their bones and put my meat to it. And but I had no, as a matter of fact, still don't have a clue what I'm doing. But it was during that time that I really said, I probably should do this, and I did.
Okay. So then you went into Harding, right, for a 2-year program.
77 to 79, I was at Harding.
And then you met your wife there, right?
No, I met Jennifer at Tech when I stayed out of school for a year from 74 to 75. I went back in the fall of 75. And she came in as a freshman. Okay. And I met her and thought I didn't have a chance with her. There's no way that somebody that pretty would like somebody like me. And I remember our first date was November the 12th, 1975. Okay. And I remember coming home and telling my friend Gary Watts, I'm going to marry that girl.
Really?
4 years later.
Hold on right there.
Lots of ups and downs, but 4 years later, it took me a while.
So what made you think that after the first date?
Jennifer is a one-of-a-kind person. I'm going to try not to cry. She's very pretty. She just had a good soul. She just had a good spirit about her. Very intelligent. Just a good heart. And I met a lot of girls, but I never really met anybody quite like her. Very, very studious, diligent, very driven, had her act together. She was a band person. She played clarinet in the college. She played clarinet. Jennifer was a very, very good musician. She plays the guitar as well.
I didn't know that.
She doesn't. We went to some people's house the other day.
Does she still play?
We went to somebody's house the other day from the Big Spring after work. We went to eat with them, and the two people that we were at their house, they both got their guitars, gave Jennifer a guitar, and we had a hootenanny. So that sounds fun. She plays, but it's not something that she's. I'm very out front. I'm very extroverted. My wife is more of the kind of hide under the table and pulling at me to make me sit down and quit being so loud.
Yeah, it's me and Anna too. She's the same way. Well, I don't think she's quite as introverted as Jennifer, but I'm the extrovert and she's the introvert as well.
Yeah. So but we met in 75 and we had some ups and downs, broke up a time or two, and I had gone to Harding thinking that it wasn't going to work, and in 1979 we got engaged and we got married in August of 1979, right before we moved to Alabama.
Okay. That's really cool. So y'all got married And then, were you in ministry at this time, or
I was when you went to Harding, you could be involved with churches, but you couldn't do it full time because you didn't have time because it was 2 years. It was 4 years of college Bible in 2 years is basically what it was. And so
okay?
you were in class. You were in class Tuesday through Friday, 8 to 4. You got a 15, 20-minute break from the morning classes, a 15, 20-minute break from the afternoon class, an hour and a half for lunch. And so Sunday, they wanted you to be involved with the church. And so I was involved at that time with the Judsonia Church of Christ because I had a really good friend who was the preaching minister there. And I taught their college class and I led their singing most of the time while I was there, and traveled a little bit, spoke at some different churches, things like that.
Okay. And so, how many churches have you ministered at?
Well, we moved to Troy. I moved there.
Okay.
We moved there in 1979. I was going there to be the campus minister to try to set up an official. They had one, but they didn't have an official campus ministry that was sanctioned by the school. And
Okay.
so they hired me to come and work with college kids. And I said, well, you know, I've just been through preacher training school, and so I really need to keep preaching. So if you'll let me preach once a month, and I'll come do that. And so, unbeknownst to me, there was a movement afoot when I moved there for the preacher to move. There were some people that wanted him to leave.
Okay.
And I came thinking I was going to work with him. And we drove into town and ate with them that night with the U-Haul, that truck sitting out in front of their house. And he wanted to borrow my truck. And I said, yeah, and I'll help you. Where are we moving? He said, no, they want me to move. I said, no. So he stayed a year, and they started looking for a preacher, and everybody they brought in, they didn't really care that much for them. They said, well, hey, look, you've been preaching for a year and we like you, so why don't you preach and we'll get another campus minister? And I said, okay, I'll consider that if you will hire Larry Klein as the campus minister.
Now, who's Larry Klein?
He was a really good friend from Montgomery, Alabama. He's been a dear friend all my life. Well, since the 70s.
Okay.
He grew up in Montgomery. He was a football player, wound up going to University of Florida to play football.
Really?
He wound up heavily involved in ministry in one of the churches in Gainesville. And I was invited down there to speak a couple of times, and that's how I met him and his wife. And he was just Larry's an evangelist. He's serious about bringing people to Jesus. And so we struck up a good friendship that remains to this day. There's hardly a month goes by that I don't talk to him. But they hired him, and son, it was game on, because the church just took off. We wound up building a building, and I was there 7.5 years, and we did some really good things. So good.
That's good. Good stuff. So where'd you go after that then?
Well, I got thinking that I had helped the church get from A to B, and I didn't know how to get them to C. Because once again, you've got your skill set of what you can do, and
right.
I'm a leader, but as far as one of those people that can say, all right, so we're here now, this is the plan to get us to here. And I didn't think I had that, and I think they had gotten accustomed to me, and they were listening but not really listening. And so a door opened up for me to go to Lakeland, Florida, to preach for the Highlands Church of Christ. Didn't want to go, didn't care anything about moving to Florida, but 7.5 of the best years of our lives were spent in Florida.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have dear friends from there. Well, and dear friends from Troy. I mean, God has always put us in a very good ministry situation. I've never talked money and how much money you're going to pay me to come and go. And so always thought, prayed, God, if this is where you want me to be, put me there. And so that's why we wound up there. And it really was a great blessing. We've got dear friends that we keep up with that um, our kids were about the same age, grew up together, and we did
Hmm.
life. One of the things about the Florida church was is that the state is very transitional, and so people come and go.
Okay.
Uh, and so if you find a fourth generation Floridian, you found something because
I didn't know that.
most folks are transplants. And
Okay.
so the church was full of people who were transplants. That when
Okay.
it came time for Thanksgiving, when it came time for sometimes Christmas, there were a lot of people that they couldn't travel home to be with family,
Hmm.
and so the church in Florida was more like a family.
That's cool.
The church in Troy too. It was more like a family than any place we'd ever been. Both of those churches. It was. I mean, we did life. We
Okay.
we were doing life with the church. It
That's cool.
was yeah, it was good.
So remind me, the first church you were at, where was that at?
It was in Troy, Alabama, South
Troy,
Alabama.
Alabama.
We were about 2 hours from the Gulf Coast. We're about an hour south of Montgomery.
Okay. So from Alabama to Florida, and then at that point, did you come up to Louisville?
Um, I had been coming to Louisville for a thing called Youth in Action.
I've heard of that.
And for some strange reason, and I have no idea why this is the case, they kept inviting me to come back. Um, every year, most every year, they would say, "Hey, will you come back and speak?" And I love to. The only thing I didn't like about coming to Louisville from Alabama and from Florida was I'd fly,
Hmm.
and I don't really care that much for flying, but I learned to
Okay.
live with it. But that one year, Chris Phelps called me and said, "Hey, we want you to come back to the Youth in Action." I said, "Okay, I'll be glad to come." And they said, "Yeah, we got a new preacher." And I said, "What do you mean you got a new preacher?" She said, "We hired Chris Smith." And I said, "Well, why didn't you hire me?" And she said, "Well, you wouldn't come." And I said, "Well, how do you know I wouldn't come? It's kind of like going on a date with a girl. You don't know if she won't go or will go unless you ask her, right?" So Chris stayed
Yeah.
about 4 years, and I got a call that said, "Hey, would you be interested in talking to us about the ministry position here at the Oklahoma Church?" And I said, "Well, let me think about that." And then after a week or so, I just got into a spot where I thought, I really don't need to stay here. It's probably um, it's a good time to look to move. And so right after I came to that conclusion, Bob Dadisman and his dad, Gilbert, called me up and said, "Hey, would you eat breakfast with us in Bartow," which was a little town down from from Lakeland. And I said, "Sure." And that's how I wound up coming to Louisville.
And what was your time? Because that's most people who watch us will be from Oklahoma, I would assume.
Yeah,
So what was your time?
I moved to
Go.
Oklahoma in 94. It was the
Okay.
summer of 94. My first Sunday here was Youth in Action Sunday. And so I started in 94, and I stayed the ministry for 18 years. Was shooting for 20, but I just felt like they probably needed a younger guy, somebody a little bit closer to the younger generation than me. And so I resigned in March of 2018, no, 2012. And
I
then
was about to say it was early because I remember I was in high school. Remember when that happened?
I transitioned out of the pulpit in the first part of 2013. I stepped out of the pulpit in January. Mark Black came and filled in February, and then um, Drew Custer came in March.
Okay.
But we had roots here. Our kids
Hmm.
were grown and gone, and we, I kept praying to God, open it, show me where you want me to go. What do you want me to do? And He opened up a couple of doors that I said, okay, I can do that. One was being a janitor at the Louisville Bible College. I went out there at night from 10 to 1 and cleaned up their facility. And Tony Jones was the one that got me that spot.
Oh, okay.
I agreed to be the assistant director of the church's Oklahoma's daycare, Sunshine House. I did that for 2 years. And I also, during that time, I wound up driving up to the Big Spring to preach for that little bitty country
Big
church.
Spring.
The Big Spring.
The Big Spring. That's a cool name for a church.
It's big. Right below it, you can walk off a hill and go down. And I've never been down to it because I don't want to walk back up because it's a pretty good hike. But there is a spring down there, and it's called the Big Spring because nobody's ever found the bottom of it. And it's they say it's huge. Like I said, I've never been down there to see it, but that's why it's called the Big Spring, is because it's adjacent next door to the Big Spring.
Next to the Big Spring.
The Big Spring.
I like it. So, like I said, most people who watch us will probably be from Oklahoma. Give me, I guess briefly, what was your time here like?
I
hated it.
My skill set, probably the strongest skill that I have, which can be the one that causes you the most difficulty. But I would say that probably the best gift God ever gave me was I'm a people person.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming to Louisville to be part of the Oklahoma church, we just did like what we always do. We don't work for you, we work with you, and we're part of the church, and we do what we can to help. And so my experience with the Oklahoma church was wonderful. We had dear friends there before we moved there.
Okay.
And good leadership. Church grew. Worked on the building, did some changing around to the building right after I got there. And then several years later, they built the Fellowship Center, which has been such a blessing to the church. But, we've our experience with the Oklahoma church has been such a blessing because just so many good people.
And I guess, what's it like at the Big Spring?
The Big Spring is a little bitty country church. When I started going there, we were having probably 50 to 65. August, maybe up to 70. Mother's Day, we had 130. It's a wide range of people. There's some older folks there. There's some young people there. There's babies and little kids growing up, middle-aged folks, single folks. It's just a hodgepodge of people, but it's in the middle of nowhere. It's off the beaten path. It's halfway between Salem and Palmyra, and it's just been a blessing because it's a good bunch of people.
That's good. Well, go ahead.
I keep telling them if they'll stop feeding me, I won't come back. I don't have
that good food, huh?
I don't have a contract with them. I'm basically a fill-in preacher, and I've been filling in since February of 2014.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. They invited me to come up in February of 2014, and they said, "Well, what are you doing next Sunday?" And I said, "Well, nothing really. I don't have any plans." They said, "Would you come back next Sunday?" I said, "Well, yeah, okay." So then it got to be at the end of the year, they'd say, "Well, you're going to come back and be with us next year?" And I said, "Well, okay, I'll be glad to do that. But just stop giving me the biscuits. Don't give me a biscuit." And I listen, I'll get the message. I'll leave. So it's a great church. But Luke, I think if you get what you get what you're looking for. And if you're looking for good people that love God and love the church, and not perfect people, but good folks, then you'll find it. If you're looking for trouble, it'll follow you. You know, you can make that happen. And so we've just been very blessed to go to places where there've been some of the finest people on earth.
I think what you said there is important. I think when it comes to churches, a lot of times you get what you put into it. And so I've heard a lot of people say, they'll get upset and say, I don't feel like this church is serving me right, or I don't feel like I don't fit in, or I don't feel like I'm connected. And there's sometimes that's the case, but I think it's important before you check out, before you throw in the towel. It's important to be the change that you want to see, and to if you don't feel connected, start connecting yourself. Start reaching out to people. Start having lunch with people. Start being the change that you want to see, because so much of church is you get what you put into it, and so much of it is with anything. So much of it is building for yourself a community with the people around you, and sometimes you are able to come into a community and it's just already there, but sometimes you gotta put in some sweat and some work to build a community, and it takes a lot of work, and I've learned that through at least my short years in life.
Gary Smith was a minister of involvement there at Oklahoma for a number of years, and I had never heard anybody say this, but he said one time that the church is very good at turning service into serve us.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times what happens is people come to the church as a spectator, and they come anticipating they're going to get something. And if you really look at it, it's more of a, you don't come there to get. Now you receive, but you come there to give, and specifically giving to God, but that you're not just giving to Him, you're giving to the other people around you. And I think that's one of the downfalls of the COVID, the pandemic, that it took
Yep.
it took an idea that a lot of people had in their head, that church was not a place where you go to participate, but it is a place where you go to spectate. And it's made it worse, that people, they don't have to be there in person. They can just watch on a screen, and they don't have to get very close. They don't have to be hands on. And my thinking on the church is, and I was talking to somebody about this just this week, is that church is a way of life. It's not a place that you go. It's not about brick and mortar. It's about a body of believers. It's about a family that follow Christ. And so, you go there to be a blessing, and you will be blessed. But it's not so much, hey, what am I going to get out of this? It's more of, what can I give?
That's how the church in Acts did it. And mentioning the COVID, I'll mention this, and then I'll ask you one last question. Then because we're already at like 45 minutes. But COVID,
that's another skill set that I have. I'm a talker.
Well, I am too, and but it's good, because this is exactly what I wanted. I just wanted to get to know people. But with COVID, it shut everything down, and there's this idea that you can kind of be, like you said, like a stay at home and just take, and it's a spectator thing. And when you really look at it, and when you really look at what happened, for the people who stayed at home and who didn't try to get involved and didn't try to reach out and make these connections, there's no difference between what you're doing and just listening to a podcast. Because there's churches nowadays, they'll put all their sermons, all their a ton of lessons on YouTube and podcasts and all that stuff. And so if we're just going to be a spectator in the church, why not go to find the best church in America and be a part of that church and listen to their church online? But that's not what church is. Church is something totally separate. Church is something, like you said, where it's about giving. It's how the church in Acts did it. It's all about what you can give, and you'll find that when you bless others, like you said, you're blessed in return, simply by just the gift of giving somebody something and in helping somebody. It blesses you inherently. And so last thing, go ahead.
Exie Dadisman, I think she was well over 100 when she died. But in her late 90s, she felt really bad. Her quality of life wasn't that good, but she was at Okolona every chance she could get. And when somebody would die, she would get all upset because she'd say, well, I wish that'd been me. They should have stayed and I should have gone because I can't do anything. And I told her one day, I said, Ms. Exie, if you don't do anything else but show up here and encourage people like me to not quit, to stay in the fight, to keep on keeping on, if that's all you do with your life, it's a life well spent.
Yeah.
You cannot do that on a screen.
Nope.
You've got to be in the thick of things where you can give people a hug. You can pray together, cry together, and you do that as a one another group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I agree. Last thing, we're pushing on.
One last question.
Yeah, the last question. Pushing on 50 minutes. But I wanted to ask you this: throughout your entire life, I guess, what is one piece of advice that you'd give to, I guess, anybody who's listening to this? Deep question.
One piece of advice. Wow. If I was talking to ministers, one of the pieces of advice I would give them is make sure that you share the message in a way that people can understand it. Don't get too high above them. One of the best compliments I ever was paid was when I lived in Troy, Alabama. I went to see a man that was older gentleman. He was in the hospital, and he said, one of the things I like about you is you preach the message in such a way. It's kind of like feeding the cows. You put the hay down there where the calves can get it. And I had never heard that before, and I thought, well, was it? And then I realized that, if you make it where the simplest of the simple can get it and understand it and embrace it, that's a good day's work. I think if I was just speaking to people in general, one of the things that I've always tried to remember is it's not how you start, it's how you finish. That it's easy to quit. It's easy to throw in the towel. It's easy to get your feelings hurt. Nobody appreciates me like they should. Nobody has an idea how much I give. And so they let the devil discourage them to the point that they throw in the towel. They quit. And I think all of us need to just realize that when you became a Christian, when you said, I want to be a follower of Jesus, it's like you pushed all the chips in on the table and you said, I'm all in. Till I die, this is what I do. This is who I am. This is the way my life is. And I would just remind people, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. There are a lot of those horses at the Kentucky Derby and all the other horse races that are run, that they start really good, but they don't last. And the one that lasts is the one that keeps running till they get to the finish line.
Good stuff, man. I needed to hear that. How's it going? Larry, thank you for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, man. I'm honored. I'm on the riverside.
Yeah, man. Hopefully people tune in and are blessed by this. That's my prayer.
You feel free to edit it however you want. I know we went long, but
I'll probably put a filter on you, make you look like princess or something.
There's some horns.
Yeah, there we go.
There's some
horns.
All right,
Larry. I love you, man.
Luke, let me say something.
Go ahead.
I love you. I've watched you grow up into the man of God that you are. You're married to one of the sweetest people. Got 2 little girls that are so precious. I love you, Mom and Dad. I've been blessed by your life, and I'm so glad you're at Oklahoma and doing some of the good things you're doing with the young people. Keep up the good work, my brother.
Thanks, man. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. You have a good time. Good night.
Bye. So I am currently fishing, but I just wanted to tell you one quick way that you can support Riverside. If you go to our Instagram page and hit the link in our bio, you'll be taken to a link tree, and from there, you can hit Riverside merch. And if you do that, it'll take you to a website called Bonfire. And what Bonfire does is they take your t-shirt design and then ship them directly to the buyer. So you can go there, you can get t-shirts, hoodies, long sleeve tees, crew neck sweatshirts, whatever you want, and it'll be shipped directly to your house. Now, the money does not go to me. As a matter of fact, the money goes to a place called Springville Bible Camp. And what Springville Bible Camp is this little tiny camp in Mitchell, Indiana, but it does great work for the Lord. I met my wife there. We got married there. Now we bring our little kids there. And basically every summer, somewhere between 40 and 100 kids each week come to Springville Bible Camp to learn about God, to learn about the Bible, to get closer to Christ, to get closer to each other. And it's just a really good place to deepen your faith. So if you'd like to support Riverside, if you'd like to support Springville Bible Camp, that's how you can do that. Now let's get started.